Recording in progress. Pat. Hello.
Hey, Sarah. My God, how long has it been since we've seen each other in person?
Well, if you weren't at that last Projekt festival that we played, then it would have had to have been when you were on tour, probably, with Thanatos.
We toured in like 96, 97, and then we did another tour after that. But by like 98, I was pretty much done doing touring. Yeah. So that would have been when Boyd, my son, was a baby, and he's about to graduate from college. So,
Yeah. So I'm thinking, it's insane how time has just bulldozered on,
Yeah, and it's funny because it both seems like it was 100 years ago and yesterday at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, and I don't feel any older.
Right.
Than I was then. In many ways, I'm probably in a lot better condition because I'm not wasted out of my skull, I was a lot of the time back then. And so, maybe that's the key deal. Get wasted when you're younger, and then stop, and then you'll feel better when you're older because comparatively you'll feel better.
Yeah.
Or you'll die. I mean,
yeah, or you'll become a terrible addict and die. One or the other.
Fortunately for me, I don't really have an addictive personality, so I got lucky there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's like that meme that you see every once in a while where it say like the 90s or 20 years ago. Like it still feels like that.
Yeah.
It's weird.
If you think about it in terms of that, it's like when I graduated from high school, the difference between the year 2000 and now is practically the early part of the Johnson administration. I mean, it's that's how long ago it was. And then like 1990 would be the difference. It would be like Elvis Presley, the difference between now and 1990 and when I graduated from high school, going back the same amount of time would be like Elvis wouldn't have quite appeared yet.
Right. It's creepy. Mike always talks about that too with a lot of times you'll see of course they're not actually younger now, but people being like, well, they're still stuck in listening to the 80s music and stuff. And they're young kids now. And it's that would have been him listening to swing music or something when he was
in high school. It was like you're listening to not even anything that cool. You'd be listening to fucking Bing Crosby or something.
Yeah.
And it's funny. My son was in high school. I would pick him up at school sometimes, and I'd be like, "You fucking kids need to get your own music." I feel these kids wearing Misfits shirts and stuff. I'm like, those fuckers. They were around they had albums out when I was in middle school, and I'm old as dirt. And I don't have a problem with people listening to older music because I listen to, I do listen to stuff from that era, that big band era, and stuff in that time period. Before that is when you start to get problematic because you're talking. Well, before that, the popular music is actually not very good. I mean, you're talking John Philip Sousa kind of stuff, or Bing Crosby. People don't realize Bing Crosby was kind of the biggest star in America until Sinatra was here. And it's and his music, he's fucking terrible. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't think there's many Bing Crosby fans out there that are going to jump on.
I don't think you're going to offend anybody. But you know what's funny? Because you and I were talking about music, and I was telling you how I don't listen to music a whole lot. And I find that when I actually do listen to music, it's stuff like that, though, because cool music, for whatever reason, has a different connotation to me, and it brings up I guess because I did music for a career for so long and the music is similar, so it makes it feel like it's work in a way. But when I listen to stuff Bing Crosby or bluegrass or hardcore rap, it doesn't have the same effect on me. So I can listen to that and it doesn't trigger this weird stress response.
Well, for me, I think there's I mean, I've always listened to a lot of different kind of music, and I like probably the most, like the stuff that makes me most relaxed is the stuff that is music that I couldn't do if I wanted to. Like, you know, I classical music. Like, I used to love to go to listen to classical music, to see it live, and it would just take me out of my head. It would just be like, or it would like help me order my thoughts. It's a very weird thing, but like hip hop is the other thing. Is like, I find like I listen to other, look, when I listen to music, I'm in many ways thinking about production and what I could steal from it, but I don't really think that about hip hop, because I just think it's ridiculous for somebody my age and with my background to even think about really trying to do hip hop music. And so it's just, I love it, and I always did. I was one of those youngsters who was like, you know, into punk rock music, but then, you know, I can remember the first time I heard The Message, and I was like, holy shit, you know, and so, and it's always been kind of the same thing. It never entered into my head to try to do that, but I just, it's like relaxing to me, even though the content makes you angry, because it's like the best hip hop music is, to this day, are the people that are singing about.
It's very punk, which probably, I mean, it's very similar to punk because it comes from the same like pissed off vibe, you know?
Right. And you know, punk rock, there's a lot of punk rock that is just shit, but at its best, it was like kind of almost a protest music. And I knock that sometimes because I feel like music doesn't do anything, but maybe it inspires somebody to do something. And maybe hip hop, I mean, there's all, like, just like the punk rock, there was a lot of like, fart, fuck you kind of shit that came out that was just all crap. And I know I went to see all those bands in the 80s when I was a kid, but there's hip hop, and there's a lot of the hip hop with the money, you know, and hoes and all that shit. And it's like, it's funny because as some of those artists, and I listen to that music too. I used to listen to the Chronic all the time. And but when you know, those artists are like apologizing for the content of their music now, you know, because they're looking back on it going, oh man, you know, why did I say that? And, you know, but it had its place and it's had its time. And I mean, you know, then you think of the bands that never had anything to apologize for, like Public Enemy or people, and because they were straight up righteous all the way through. Anyway. But anyway, you know, Tribe Called Quest would be another one that would leap to mind. That is somebody, they were always, I mean, it wasn't, like, and they managed to also be fun. Like, they're singing about something and they're doing something fun. And I think that is really cool to me. I mean, I listen to country music. I listen to, but I listen to more stuff that's not quite country music. Like, it's kind of, you know, like John Hyatt, Joe Ely, you know, people like that. And, you know, like a lot of the bands that are kind of like it, you know, what is Sharon Van Etten? You know, what does she do? Is that like, because sometimes it almost sounds country, and then then it sounds like straight up like, you know, goth almost.
Right.
And so what is that? And does it really need to be? Does it need a label? And to me, it doesn't.
See, that's been the struggle forever. Like, I think any band that's good doesn't fit in a box. They can tiptoe around a lot of different genres, you know, because they're not trying to be something. They're just making music that they feel.
Yeah, that inspires them, or that like the content. And, you know, I'm sitting here going on about, like, I'm perfectly okay with people who don't write songs about injustice. You know, they write love songs. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, you know, Casey and the Sunshine Band. You know, there's nothing wrong with that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that unless you're the person who defines the genre, like they make up the genre because of you, I find if you could be put into something neatly, that's problematic. But, you know, all that shit is just to sell people records. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, exactly.
It's marketing, you know. And yeah, back in the day, a lot of people got pissed, and I'm talking in the 90s, about being labeled goth. And I got that because if you were trying to make a living doing it, you didn't want that hung around your neck. Even if you were into it, it was like you were better off not being called that, because for a while it had become something of a joke. You know, there was like Saturday Night Live skits making fun of goth.
Right.
And it was like and the funny part of that, the reason those skits were funny is that they kind of had a little bit of reality in them. You know?
100%.
And
I knew people. I'm sure you knew people like that.
Yeah, I mean, but I also was like, you know, for me personally, it was like I never felt, you know, I never really was comfortable with being called anything.
Exactly.
I remember being a high school kid, and like my hair's standing on end, and when people like calling me saying punk rock, I'm punk, and I'm like, fuck that, that's dead, it's over. And keep in mind, this is like 1982, you know. So,
yeah.
And so I was never comfortable with that. I was also uncomfortable with the notion of, even if I wasn't like really, I didn't sound like Bauhaus or the Sisters of Mercy, I knew that fans, people that did like my music, would have considered themselves to be goth.
Sure.
And I didn't feel like, I didn't want to insult people. I never became angry if somebody referred to the music I did as goth. I think the connotation's different now.
I think it is too. I think it's, I mean, I know, you know, we had lots of conversations about that back in the day, because, you know, I mean, I can tell you so many different scenarios where people said to us, like way after the fact, oh yeah, I heard of you guys and stuff, but I never listened to it because I just thought you were a dumb goth band. Well, that's not because we called ourselves goths, because we never did. And again, it's like you said, like, duh, I understand that people who call themselves goths listen to Lycia, but there's also the kid that listens to like shoegaze music and the metal guy and, you know, whoever else. So you can call yourself whatever you want, just don't apply what you think you are to me. That's the
right
thing.
And I think that it's perfectly cool if somebody really is into like goth. I mean, when I was younger, I became a little bit I'm young, not young, but younger than I am now. I was a little bit like kind of put off by like just people who, it just seemed like all they were doing was playing dress up. They didn't even really care about the music. They just cared about the look. And then now when I look back on that, I'm like, who cares? Good for them. It's all they get out of it, and it brings them happiness, and good for them. But like you said, it was a calculation in some ways that you didn't. It was a business thing almost. Like at that time, having that hung on you was not a good thing, and it also brought certain expectations.
Exactly.
Because, well, they would book us into these goth clubs, and I'm like, it was always. I'm sure like the people that I'm sure it was a little bit disappointing for some of those people, because they're expecting a goth band, and then I come out and it's like, we don't even have a drummer, you know, or a drum machine half the time. It's like, it was always, you know, some later on we did, but like when we first went out, it was like, I was listening to some of the early Thanatos tour tapes, and we were weird. I mean, it was like wailing electric guitar with an acoustic guitar and a bass and maybe a little bit of keyboard, no drums, no beat, no nothing. And it was just like kind of this, it was kind of crazy sounding. And it didn't dawn on me at the time how, because I didn't think of it as experimental. It was partially the song choice back in those days. And then as we went on, as you go around touring and playing in these little clubs, and if you're soft mellow, people talk over you. Yeah. And it's miserable. So then by the end of the time we were touring, we sounded like Led Zeppelin, because it was like, fuck you, we're going to play really fucking loud, and we're going to have a drummer, and fuck you. So, well,
and I can remember so many times, because again, I mean, you know, we would roll up into these goth nights or whatever. Mike's standing there with his big beard, long hair, cowboy boots. I've got Adidas on, and people like legit, because they didn't know really what we looked like for the most part, because back in the day, images were pretty blurry. And people would be looking at us like, who are you? Like, why are you even here? And then we'd walk on stage and you could physically see some people going, ooh, oops, you know.
Well, also I always felt like people went to goth nights, because when I was a kid and I went to goth nights and stuff, I went to dance.
Right.
I didn't want to see some fucking band. And so that was the other problem. It was like, I felt like I was interrupting people's dance nights when I would get booked at some of those places. And, you know, I didn't necessarily feel bad about it then. I feel bad about it now. But then I felt irritated that I was, you know, in that. And I even know one of the most recent things, I actually got booked to do an acoustic thing fairly recently, and it was at a goth club. And as soon as I walked into the place, I was like, what the fuck did I do this for? And it was exactly that. People were there to dance. They didn't want to. Yeah. There were some people that came early to see me, and the whole idea was to play early. But then things got fucked up, and it didn't work. And I can tell you that I will never ever do that again. It's highly unlikely that I'm going to play very much live, but I'm never doing that again.
I don't.
You can get away with it in Chicago. You can get away with it here in Chicago. I think it like because mostly you're going to be booked by like Sarah, and her nights people kind of expect it. Not that they would book me to play at one of their big nights, because that would bore everybody to death.
Yeah, I don't think we would ever play. I know for a fact we would never play any of those places ever again, ever. It'll be like art gallery and, you know, places that are built to put on shows, not dance nights.
Right. And none of this is knocking that. It's just an inappropriate place. Because there's like a high energy thing that goes on in any club, whether it's a goth club or any dance club. It's like there's like this kind of energy, a high energy vibe, and neither one of us do music that has like a real high energy to it, you know?
Yeah.
And even I remember talking to Tucker, like even when we played live and we kind of rocked things up a little bit, his comment was, "It just we never get quite rock," you know?
Yeah.
And it was like close, but, and I remember the first Projekt Fest when we played, like people apparently told other people that we were like rock and roll. If you listen to that set, and I have it on tape, we played 3 songs with the drummer. We played the first song with the drummer, we played something in the middle with the drummer, and then we ended with a drummer playing a cover of Don't Fear the Reaper. And the rest of it's acoustic.
Yeah.
And with no drummer. And it's like, but compared to everybody else, compared to poor Michael Plaster, who had to walk out with his acoustic guitar after us, we sounded like, you know, we were like a rock band.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, these days I'm much more focused trying to record shit. Although the only time I ever got excited about playing was when you told me you were looking at booking a show out there, and I'm like, book me on that show.
Yeah, you know, and the thing is too, back to the show thing, I feel like people would have different expectations now versus back then, because back then, I think, because you remember those goth industrial bands were super popular back in the day, and they all had the look, and they, you know, this and that. And then, so there would always be some like band like that opening for us. Then we'd walk out and be like Smoke Machine, and, you know, which is so common now. Like, I feel like we're in the wrong era, Pat.
Yeah, well, you know, there's all these like kind of dark music bands that have a similar sound to you. There were a couple labels that have kind of fallen apart over the past several years, but they had all these bands that they played this dark music, but they all looked like Mike. You know, they all wore T-shirts and jeans. There was it wasn't like a lot of, I mean, I have nothing, I almost envy that, because I am just not like, I don't have the patience to fucking, that's why I like punk rock. You can just like put some fucking model glue in your hair and wear clothes you found in your mom's closet, and you know, and put safety pin through your ear, and that's all you needed to do. The more ridiculously you look, the better. And I could live with that. I think I also had an advantage over you guys in that your publicity photos did look goth. Mine, I just looked like I look.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing about, I mean, there was nothing, I'm standing there in a loud jacket, you know, and that's what they all look like. That's what all my publicity photos, you can identify me in them. And whereas you guys, they were like stylized. They were like actually, you know, So you suffered for your artistic photographs.
The positive though now, like let's say we did a show now, nobody would expect us to come out looking like anything but what we look like. I don't think anybody cares about that kind of stuff anymore. I really don't. You know.
I think that that's true in general. I think it's true in general. I think that there's you could probably find somebody somewhere that that thinks how you look matters, and they're probably 16 years old. And God bless them, because that's not everybody is when they're 16 years old.
Yeah.
I was certainly. And but I think mostly that's true. I think people don't care. I've also found that younger people, and this is why I love younger people so much, people, and I mean people under 30 and even under 25, is that they don't give a shit about the genre so much anymore. I mean,
yes.
I went to a lot of festivals with my son, and there'd be these bands that were like hard rock bands, and there'd be these bands that were kind of almost ambient, and there was hip hop. And I'd be looking at the people, and I'd be thinking, there's no way they're going to like this band. And then not only do they like it, I'm looking at them, they know the words, like they're actual fans. And so I think that the whole kind of like, I have to look like the band on the stage thing is fucking out the window now.
Yeah. I think that's awesome.
I do too. I think people should look however the fuck they want. And I think they should look however the fuck they want, whether they're 16 or 70.
Yeah.
And if you're a 70-year-old, you want to have a fucking mohawk, more power to you.
Yeah.
And I don't think that how you look should have to dictate what kind of music you listen to or art you like or whatever,
Yeah. Because I mean, I know you're this way also. Like, we've always liked a wide variety of music. Like, do I like some goth bands? Of course. But I also like Conway Twitty, and I also like, hardcore rap. I like Godflesh, blah, 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 blah. So I can never understand the desire people have to like label themselves, because to me, that's limiting. If I say I'm this, then I have to be this, which to me just seems silly. But, I mean, some people just live and die by that stuff. And
I think that, and this is like above my pay grade, but what I think that is I think that it's people who are trying to form an identity. And I think that's why you see it in younger people a lot. Like when you're 16, you want to be a punk rocker, you want to be a this, or at least when I was a kid. Like I said, the kids today seem to be a little less focused on that, but they still are.
Sure.
And so you're trying to identify yourself as something. You're trying to form your identity's forming, and I think that's part of it. If you ask me why that is the case in people who are older, then I am unsure. But I would guess it's something similar. I would guess that it's that there are people that their identity, they don't have a strong sense of who they are.
Maybe it's a bit of tribalism too. It's like the whole, I'm a Cubs fan, I'm a Bears fan, like, as I say, Chicago teams. But you know what I mean? like, I get people just want to define themselves, and to me that's personally off-putting. I don't do that to myself.
You just made me think of it in a strong historical context to that too. Like in the Roman Empire, and especially in the Byzantine Empire, there were like people identified very strongly with these gladiator. I guess I don't know if school is the right word, but there were different like teams of gladiators, and they were signified by certain colors, and people would wear those colors, and they fucking kill each other in the streets over it. And so it goes back that far. I mean, it reminds me of like, Raiders fans beating somebody up in the parking lot. It's like the same basic thing. And, and I remember that like punk rockers, this was a little before my time, because I was probably not getting, I didn't look old enough to get into bars, but in South Florida, there was a thing with punk rockers versus surfers, and they would fight all the time and fuck with each other and shit. And so that is, I mean, that's to me, obviously, that's like a kind of tribalism. But I think that identity, like forming your identity, that's part of it. And I mean, I suppose that could be constructive too, because we are social animals. But it's when you make it ridiculous, when you go to ridiculous lengths,
right?
And it's over your personality, your individual personality. I think that's a little weird. especially in older people. So.
Yeah, I just have always felt it seems so limiting to me to do that to yourself. Like I'm only this little finite spot here. I'm just gonna stay in my lane. I mean, if that makes you happy and whatever, go for it. But it just seems very limiting to me, you know.
But you know what is also interesting is that I was just cleaning up the Thanatos mailing list, which had gotten massive, and I'm like, half these fucking people don't want to be on this. So I'm going to like try to clean it up a little bit. And I was spending that, and I asked people questions about how they listen to music, like specifically what streaming services do they use, because I'm working on some of the streaming sites, especially Spotify. So anybody who uses Spotify, go follow Thanatos. You can help me like with my project. But people had a lot of different takes. Some people were like, I don't do any streaming. And then some people were like trying to tell me about how streaming works. Well, I already know. So, but I was asking how they use it, not how it affects artists. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about how it works for artists, because people say, I've heard artists complaining about them. going, musicians are always complaining about shit. They all think they should be handed a suitcase full of money every time they put out a record. And guess what? 99.9% of the time, that doesn't happen. Like there's a handful of bands that make a lot of money and everybody else is fucked. And if you thought you were going to get rich being a musician, odds are you weren't. And the truth is that the streaming in some ways democratizes stuff a little bit, because anybody can get their shit up streaming. And so, and especially things like Bandcamp. Now, I don't want to get into all the business stuff because that's boring, but my point is that I can go on these streaming services and listen to something and just kind of thumb my way through things and run across things. And somebody tells me a name of a band and I go look and I find them, I listen to them. And like genre doesn't matter. None of that stuff. It's all, there's this vast pile of music out there that you can go and get. And you're not bound by like the buying the physical copy, which some people like as a point of pride talk about how they do that, and that's cool. And I always try to make some physical copies of stuff. But at the same time, think of that. Like there was like at the hipster record stores I went to, they wouldn't have been called hipster, but they went back then, punk rock or whatever, record stores I went to, they didn't have country music. They didn't have jazz. They didn't have ambient sometimes. They didn't have a lot of that stuff. And so you kind of like were funneled, like if you had a certain music that you liked, you went to places and bought things related to that. And I just think there's so much more open to you now. Bandcamp, although they don't pay for streaming, there's another thing. That's even more, like literally anyone. I mean, you know, you can get stuff distributed to Spotify and all those places through various businesses, but it costs you. And that's the thing. If you only have 10 listeners a month, it's not worth the money.
Right.
But Bandcamp, you can do pretty much for free. I mean, you don't pay anything for that.
Yeah.
And
I love Bandcamp.
So, yeah, I like it. I don't like it for streaming. I wish, because I don't make any money if people stream from there. But I do like it for downloading because I think they have relatively high quality stuff. It also cracks me up when people start talking about like they prefer these really high quality, you know, recordings of my stuff, and I'm like going, do you know how I record this shit? Like 9 times out of 10, it's pretty fucking primitive shit. Like the Blisters record, which sounds fabulous, was partially recorded on a fucking 16-track cassette recorder, partially on a half-inch reel-to-reel, but only a little bit of it, and then most of it was like this virtual on this junky ass equipment.
Okay, not to mention the fact, Pat, that back in the day, we would trade tapes on these $1 cheap ass pack of tapes that we bought in bulk from the Kmart or whatever, and they would be sometimes dubs of dubs of dubs of dubs because you couldn't go download and find everything you wanted. So you had this friend in Kentucky that had a tape, and he'd send you a copy of it, and then you'd dub it to somebody. I mean, so quality, whatever, dude. We had, you know, we made do with our cheap ass stuff back in the day.
But the truth is, I interviewed the late great country songwriter and performer Guy Clark years ago for a publication I worked for, and I forget who he was talking about, but we were talking about recording, and he was talking about recording, how he had a recording studio in his house, but he never used it, so he turned it into a woodworking workshop and made guitars. And but he was talking about somebody, and he was saying, yeah, how they recorded that was probably on a 2-track. They probably had a mic hanging in the middle of the room. He's like, but it sure sounds good coming out of a AM radio in your car, you know. Yeah. And that's how it needed to sound. And these days with digital, you do get a better sound, but a lot of the stuff I have going into the digital is questionable. So I mean, you know, it's like if you take the first 2 Thanatos records and you were like really going to be audiophile and get the highest quality of those you could get, I mean, there'd be a lot of hiss in your future, because we used to have to roll stuff off, and when like the instruments came off, we'd have to like clip them, because you could hear the hiss when stuff was loud. The hiss from the tape or from the whatever, God knows what, you know. We did some stuff that just, there's a weird sound coming out of the microphone. Sure. And it's like, well, let's record that. That sounds cool. And you know, and it's accompanied by all kinds of shit, but it sounds cool. So who gives a fuck about that?
Well, and you know, Mike has never used any kind of fancy equipment. I mean, we use SM58s to record our vocals. We don't, you know, everything is like cheap equipment that, I mean, Mike's still using acid to record, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean,
I don't think it matters.
Wasn't Ionia recorded on a Fostex 424 cassette thing, I think?
Yeah, so was Start Corner. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was back 4 tracks.
Yeah. I actually recorded, like, one of my records, I Am Not Job, has 2 songs that were also recorded on the Fostex. One of them's a Billy Bragg cover. The other one, I don't remember which song it is. I'd have to go look at it. But I actually gave that away, and I regret it now that I gave it away, because I would like to have it now, because I am, like, recording-wise, I'm hopeless. I'm like, I am not an engineer. And, like, the software makes me nervous. I know how to use it, but I'm just not, that doesn't work for me. So I actually I want to have hardware.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really want tape, because tape's a pain in the ass, but like digital hardware is where I'm headed to when it comes to trying to record and by myself and things like that.
Well, that's kind of why Mike hasn't switched from Acid, because he knows that program backwards and forwards. So having to like learn a new program and all of the process of that, and, you know, figuring out the tricks all over again, he's just like, why, you know?
But if it works, it works. And
exactly.
Like, the thing is, I remember reading a review of one of the Lycia records, and it might have been Star Corner, because I don't think I was working at Projekt yet when the Ionia came out. And it was like talking about, it was like some writer waxing eloquent about the sound recording and how this and that, and they were completely wrong about everything. They were like, I'm like, you have no fucking idea what you're talking about. But thank you, it's a cool review.
Yeah.
And,
well, you know, it's funny. Everyone's like, oh, cold is so great and blah blah blah. Dave's the equipment he had, the recorder had mold growing in it. So if you listen to the song later, you can hear it warbling, and people assume that's effect. That was his machine dying, literally dying. There was mold growing in it, and it was dying. Just hilarious.
When I recorded, I think it was the first Thanatos record with Sam, the board literally at one point shot flames out of it. Something caught on fire, and we had to take the board, get in Sam's car, and drive down to Orange County to Walter Holland's house to have Walter fix the board so he could finish recording the record. And those first 2 records are all on 1/2-inch tape, and then part of the Blisters records on 1/2-inch tape. But it's like, it just is such a hassle. It's so expensive to do that. And I mean, if you were releasing vinyl, maybe, but I've been in mastering with people, and it's like, I have an okay ear. I can hear when something's off. I can better than probably 90% of the people on Earth. And I think that's not bragging, because I think there's a certain some people are completely tone deaf. Some people
Sure.
are, you know, but then there's that little group of people that is a minority who can hear, like, I was in a mastering thing and they were talking and they're hearing like 0.001 megahertz difference in things. And I'm like, I can't tell I don't even know what you're fucking talking about. It's like, and they're fixing it. And I'm all like, go, more power to you, fix it. But at the same time, I'm thinking nobody's going to hear the difference.
Right. No one cares, really.
Yeah. I mean, if there's something really wrong,
Yeah.
then I get it. And I've had that I've recorded with a lot of people who are like deferential to me because I'm weird with recording. I prefer recording to, like, I don't know. It depends on what my mood is. I don't really love playing live, and I don't really love recording. I actually love writing the songs. But when I'm recording, I get kind of tense. And so sometimes I'll play faster or I'll play, and I make mistakes. And yeah, I've had people be like, oh, the mistakes are part of the charm. I'm like, no, they're fucking mistakes. And that kind of stuff is intolerable to me. Like if you're missing notes or you're fucking something up. And
for sure.
But even that, I was just listening to it tonight. I did a cover of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah on the Coyote in the Graveyard record. And I had recorded that ages before that I really got to work on that record. And I had just said, fuck it, that's shit. I don't want to use it. And then I listened to it again. And my only gripe was when I was changing chords, I deadened the string at one point. And it kind of sounds thunka, thunka, thunka. But that is one of those cases where the only person who knew that was a mistake was me.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of be able to balance that. Like,
yeah.
You can't freak over every little thing, but you can't let obvious shit go.
Right. Mike's got certain songs, like, that really bother him because he knows what it was supposed to sound like. And like, to me, I'm like, it sounds fantastic. He's like, yeah, but you don't know what it was supposed to sound like. Like, yeah. So like,
nothing,
like that.
Nothing ever sounds like I mean it to when I start. Very rarely. Sometimes I do, but very rarely. And it's like, I remember there was a song, I forget which song it was. I was blatantly ripping off another song. I'm not going to mention what song it is because I don't want to get sued. You can't tell. And I fuck it up so bad that you can't tell that I'm ripping off that song. I'm like, I want this chord thing. And it works, but it's like, it's like almost like how you use it. You take a sample out of something and you detune it to the point where you can't you speed it up or whatever. You can't tell what it is, but it's still cool. I mean, the Blisters record, that's a gigantic lawsuit. That whole record is like, oh my God. Like the uncleared samples on that record are like insane. And I didn't even know it at the time because I wasn't familiar with some of the music that was turned up sampled. And then there was a particular jazz, let's say a jazz, without saying the name, a jazz guy who veered over into kind of electronic music back in the 80s. And I knew his music, but there was a record by him I didn't know. And I hear it, I'm like, holy shit, that is like the most blatant fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. It's so obvious. And it's in one of the songs. And it's like, I didn't recognize that at the time because that's the one record where I had almost nothing to do with the music. Tucker did almost all. I did the melodies and I wrote all the lyrics, obviously. But the music and the structure, like a couple of the songs I came in and said, like, No Longer at Ease, I wrote the chord, the basic chord progression. And a couple of the other songs, I came in with the chord progression, and then he would take it and run wild with it. So most of the music, I didn't do. I was there when we were recording, obviously, but I didn't do it. And then the samples came in, and it's funny because some of them I knew, and I was like, yeah, that ain't gonna work. But the ones I didn't know, how could I? Hey, somebody just pop their head in there?
Dirk likes to come and sneak his face in every once in a while.
Hi, Dirk. I've never met Dirk, but I feel like I know him because I've seen.
Hey, Dirk, come here.
He's a baby.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel like that because they've watched him since even before he was born. He's funny. He got an electric guitar for Christmas. So he started learning his electric guitar. He's going to start taking keyboard lessons, and he does viola. So he's interested in the family business, I guess. Anyways.
Yeah, my son's studying psychology, so
that's awesome too.
He doesn't play an instrument. I got him instruments. He just never really had. I think he wanted to learn them, but like you have to actually practice and stuff. So,
right.
I took lessons when I was a kid, but I've never, like a lot of the other things, like I never took lessons on the bass. I never took lessons, and I can play bass because I have to if I'm going to do it, recording. And I've got a keyboard now, and I can play one-handed, you know. But I never took lessons on anything other than guitar. Oh, you know what? That's not true. I took a mandolin lesson. But I barely remember any. I was actually just thinking, I was writing bass lines the other day, and I'm going, you know, I never learned how to read music in the bass clef. I can read treble clef because I played the guitar, and that's how I learned. And I'm like, man, in college I took a class where I learned a little bit about how to write in the bass clef. I'm like, that would be really useful, like writing these bass lines, that I could actually write it down instead of trying to fucking remember it or record it with my phone or whatever. Because that's what I usually do.
Mike doesn't do any of that. He doesn't. Mike does. I think Mike might be able to read music a little bit, but he doesn't do any of that either.
Oh, in my lifetime, I've actually notated one song. Where I wrote down notes. I did that for one song, and it's on the first Thanatos record. The song that's the only one I ever notated. And when I notated it, the lyrics were completely different. It was a totally different song. And then I changed the lyrics to make it about something else. But when you're writing a bass line, like when you're writing chords to a guitar, you can just write G, D suspended fourth, whatever the fuck it is. But when you're writing a bass line, those are notes, and it's like much harder for me to remember. I can remember, like, I was writing something last night, and I'm like, oh, this is a really good bass line. But I didn't record it. And so I know where my fingers went, but I don't know the rhythm I had.
Yeah.
And so you'll probably never be able to come up with that again. And so, you know, I've actually become very bit like, you know, the first Thanatos record came out in '93. 2 years later, there was another one. 2 years later after that, there was another one. And then I didn't do a record for like 5 years, 6 years or something like that. And then it was like 8 years.
Yeah.
The record, Exterminating Angel, I used to always say that record was like my Chinese democracy because it took so fucking long for it to get done. I took a hot sauce bottle through my hand that severed all the nerves to my thumb. And so it fucked, not only did it fuck my hand up, like I couldn't use this hand for a while. And then I had to have, then after that, I had to have surgery on the hand. That pushed it even further back. And then I still can't feel part of my hand. And so I had to adjust holding the pick.
Oh my God.
I would drop the pick out of my hand when I was playing because I couldn't feel it. And so it was kind of an adjustment. Actually, part of that happened before the I Am Not Job record, actually. So it's not even, that didn't even contribute to the length of time in the other one. Now that I think of it, because I'm trying to think, which record was it? Fuck, I don't remember. Actually, you know what? It is Exterminating Angel because Ashkel Insane is on that record. And when I went out there to record with him, we recorded several songs, and I could hardly play. And he's a really good musician anyway. And he played guitar on the song Brother Dragon, and he played guitar on there's one other one, and then there's Carrick Fergus who did this. I wanted to do this Irish song, Carrick Fergus, and I was like, I just couldn't play right. And and Ash just played that song, like arranged a new version of it in his fucking head. It's like 8 minutes long, and did it in one take.
Yeah, he's got like crazy genius level
Yeah.
Great.
And then miraculously, I sang the vocals straight through in one take. We had to punch in one thing that I fucked up, and that's it. And that's, I mean, I tend to do that when I'm doing vocals. Like I've worked with people who are like, Sam Rosenthal used to do this to me, where you're like, do something else, do another vocal take, because there's and it's like, I can do 50 vocal takes, and they're all going to be pretty much. It's like you were saying about the microphone. Like people would have these fancy microphones that pick up, and it's like all you're doing is picking up me going, and then that's what you're picking up. You're gonna pick that shit up, and then you're gonna have to clean that up.
Yeah.
But I'm like, if fucking Bono can sing using a SM57 in the control room, then I don't need anything. I do have a blue microphone that I got recently, but I got that. I probably would use it for vocals too if I was recording here, but I really got that to record instruments.
Yeah.
And I'm like you guys. I'm fancier than Bono because I use an SM58 usually.
Yeah, it's funny. We bought a fancy microphone one time, and we went to record it, and I said, I hate this microphone. It's like you said, you could hear, I don't want to hear my spit in my mouth. It's disgusting.
Tucker and I were recording one time, and it was some kind of really fancy mic, some kind of high-end AKG, I think. And it was like, no, I wasn't recording with him then. He was recording with somebody else who shall remain nameless. And they were being a pain in the ass, but they were recording demos at his place. And the microphone was like, it was so sensitive. And it's weird to me because usually they have a range that they pick up only within a certain range. But this mic was picking up trucks on the street. Like you could hear rumbling past. And I'm like, what is the point of that? And I mean, maybe there was something wrong with that. And it was probably more that it was picking up vibrations that got into the house. It wasn't like the actual, like the truck drives by and the windows rattle, and it was probably picking that up rather than, but usually like those mics you're getting, it only, they won't detect anything past a few feet. But not always. And I've never seen the point. I always felt like, it's the $50 saddle on the $20 horse thing, like with me. Like, right. It's only so good I'm going to sound,
I think it's too, I think it might be the punk rock background in all of us that we're just like, we don't need this fancy shit. Like, we'll just do what we do. And, you like it or you don't like it. It's whatever.
Well, I mean, I've had a luxury of recording with a lot of people who really knew what they were doing. And it's funny because what Sam did know what he was doing when I was recording with him the first record. But he knows a lot more now. Like he's way better in the studio now. He's very good. The last record, Portland, that I recorded with Sam was actually a joy to work on. But I've also had work with, I love the country record. I just did the cover with William Faith. And I mean, that record sounds way better than it should. It's just me and a guitar. And I wanted to add stuff to it. And William was the one who convinced me to just leave it as is. But he's great. And then I worked with Tim Larson, whose home studio I recorded a couple of records at, the Coyote in the Graveyard and Exterminating Angel. A lot of those records were recorded at his place, and he really was good at like kind of like coming up with like talking me off the ledge when I didn't like something or whatever. And so I really had a lot of luck. Tucker was great. Greg Lucas, who's the guy, his project called Manipulator, which is all consonants, MNL. I don't know, you could Manipulator, but just take all the vowels out. And I think that's up on Bandcamp now. And I really like that record, his music a lot. But I worked a part of a record with him, and they all just were really good to work with. But most of them didn't have particularly sophisticated equipment.
Right.
I mean, William obviously has kind of a commercial studio 13 studios where people can, pay and go and record stuff. And so that's probably a little more sophisticated. And Sam has a nice setup now too. But none of it is like expensive recording studio shit. I wouldn't even know what to do with that.
It's so funny because people people always like, oh yeah, we're going into the studio, and you have this thing in your mind that they're in this actual studio. Like literally when we record, Mike is in our bedroom, laptop open on the foot of the bed, sitting on a foldable chair, microphone stand, guitar. Like that's, and then if I did come in and do vocals, you're sitting in the folding chair with your SM50, you know, there's nothing. And then when we're done, we pack it up and put it under the bed. It's like, there's no.
Well, I don't like, I would prefer to record vocals without anybody looking at me.
Yeah.
But in recent years, it's been impossible because the people I've been recording with, they don't have a setup where there's a vocal booth, so I'm fucked. And so I had to get used to just being there and singing. And so I got over that little phobia. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, Sam at both his old house in California and then where he lives now, he basically has a room. It's like the studio room.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so that's what, I mean, it's funny how we recorded. Like, it's just, when I went back I hadn't recorded a record with him for 25 years. When we went back and we're recording, it was like, it was the same exact shit how we did it before. I would come in, I do my parts, and then I kind of go in the other room and I sit there, and he plays it back and, you know, fixes any fuck ups or things that need fixed. And then he starts adding his, like, he said, well, what do you want me to do? And I'd be like, kind of like general, like low end, high end, whatever. And, you know, sometimes I'll tell him, like, you know, he's adamant against using marimbas, like I made him use on the first record. But I sit in the other room and I listen to him, what he's doing. And it's kind of like, I don't think, if it's good, I just sit there and listen. And if it's something I don't like, I'll holler out. And, you know, it was exactly the same way we recorded stuff in the past. I mean, the problem with that is that we're not going to, I don't think we're going to get like a lot of different sort of material, because I think we both kind of like, we do what we do.
Yeah.
And so it'd be kind of interesting. I think that if we ever record again together, I would love to like toss something weird into the mix, like have some other person like do something, like just to fuck things up a little bit.
Yeah.
I play all the guitars on that record, the Portland record, and like people were like, "Wait, you play the electric guitar too?" You know, like and it's like, it's a fucking guitar. I mean,
yeah.
you can play. It's like I'm not like, you really don't want me doing the leads on a metal album or anything, but you know, I've been playing the guitar for 40 something years. Do you know one of the things that never happened at Projekt that was my brainchild, that it just never really, it had come up, and I don't even know if Sam would remember this, and I don't know if I even told you or anybody else about this, because it just never really kind of came together. But I had this idea back in the day, this is in the 90s, that we should have different bands pair off and do like an EP together.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, and
I
it was
remember that.
like Black Tape does a record with, you know, Michael Plaster, or
Yeah.
and I always wanted to do a Thanatos with Lycio record. That was what I wanted to do.
That would have been fun.
Yeah, but it just never really. It's a daunting project, let's just say.
Yeah.
Because everybody lives in different places. I think at that point, like we were back in Chicago, Los Spirals Downwards, or Los Spirals, or I don't know if they were Los Spirals Downwards still then. We're in California. You guys were in, I think you were in Arizona at that point.
We were in Ohio at that point.
You might have been in Ohio. I don't remember exactly. And, you know, other people were like, Steve Roach would have been. And some of the people, like, what incentive does Steve Roach have to do that? You know, because it's like he puts out 4 records of his own stuff a year and does well with it. So why? What's in it for him? But he did. I remember talking to him years ago where he said he wanted to do an industrial record and just call it Roach.
You know, we worked with him tripping back into the Broken Days. We went in down to Tucson, and he added his little touches to it, and that was, I mean, so we sort of collaborated a little bit with him on that.
Well, I would have loved to have seen him do a record with like Martin, like Attrition Meat. Because like you got that industrial rock, you got that like meticulous kind of ambient music. My gripe with a lot of ambient music is lack of musicality. Like it's like and like a monkey could do it. A monkey could do it. Not Steve Rhodes. Or Robert Willis or people like that. There's this
next level
sonic, like it's not even necessarily that they're playing something. It's like the whole. That's one of those things where you can tell them, you can get the, like if you have a good stereo system. That's the kind of music that you're like, it matters. Every little
like Coil. Remember Coil? How Coil was like that.
Yeah, every frequency matters in that kind of music. But I just, it's one of those things. Like it was also funny. Like I don't know how many years or so, like after the last Projekt Fest single date, when they did some other ones here and there, but they weren't kind of the real. They were basically shows because they were usually one day. And we had talked a couple of times about doing another Projekt Fest. So it was just like, we would talk about it. I would start thinking about it. I'd start figuring, and then it would be like, "Oh fuck this," because it was like.
We could probably end up making that happen, probably in like Portland or something.
I mean, the real problem is that like, my view, like when we first wanted to do that, I remember like there were a couple people, and even the guys at the theater, the Vic Theater where we did the first two. I think they did the third one there too. The 2 nights at the Vic, the guy was like, "Do you really want to use a theater this big? Why don't we?" And I'm going, "Oh yeah," because they didn't realize we had the first year we had like 900 people per night.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
And then the second one we had 1,100, which is pretty close to selling the venue out. I think it holds 12. How many holds depends on how they set it up.
Sure.
But I think the max is 1,200, and so those shows did really well. But it took a year's worth of promotion. People don't realize we decided we were going to do the first one a year before it happened, and the PR doing the press for that, it started worldwide, and we mostly me worked because Sam had other shit to do like putting out records and running the actual business, worldwide, contacting people in Australia and fucking Germany and all over the world. In Japan, a guy from Japan came, a journalist came and interviewed us. And I still have the articles, they're all in Japanese and there's like my name. And I'm like, I wonder what that quote says, because I can't read it. I really got that right. And then we brought it in. And then it was like, okay, North America. We're talking to people, Canada, Mexico, the United States. And then it was the United States. And then it was like regional, like a month or two before you're trying to get the people that could drive in from Indiana. And then like the last couple of weeks, you're just beating the bushes to try to scare up anybody in this area who would show up. And so that, my view on, if you're going to do it, you got to do it like that. Yeah. And that means somebody has to come up with a bunch of fucking money, right? Because rental on that theater was like a lot. It was like 15 grand or something like that per night or something like that. And I may be wrong on that figure because I have a mind like not a steel trap, the opposite of a steel trap.
A sieve.
But so, I think I've always thought that if you could get people like certain, like the bands that are the most important bands to have would be Lycia, Love Spirals Downwards, and probably Black Tape. But I also think some of the, like, I hesitate to do it all just the older bands. I mean, this is never going to happen. I'm just saying, like, you could do it and you can make it work, but somebody really has to believe in it and cough up the money for it. And, I actually have talked to people about doing festivals who were wealthy fans. This is when I lived in Florida. And I said, we could do a festival here in the wintertime in South Florida, and we would do really well. Because first of all, everybody wants to get the fuck out of Minnesota and shit when it's 4 degrees out, like it is right now here. It's like 10 degrees.
Yeah.
And so you could do a festival here. And it was like, but they didn't know anything about how to do a festival but they were going to give the money for it. So they were like in charge, even though they had no idea how it worked. It was going to be their thing, and they were going to be in charge, and it was just like, yeah, it won't work. because you know what the fuck you're doing. And then you're going to start handing out favors and be like, I'm going to book my friend's band. They're a reggaeton band. Why would you book them? You know, like that kind of stuff. And it's very South Florida because that's what is almost guaranteed to happen there if you have outside money come in. And so, I don't know. It's a fantasy. But Sam and I would come up with this every 4 or 5 years, and then we would, fuck it, you know, and it would never happen.
Can you imagine doing the original lineup?
I think that would be cool. I'm trying to think who was the first night. It was
Arcanta, I think.
Well, he's still around here somewhere. I don't know if he performs anymore, but
I think it was Arcanta.
Well, Steve Roach played both nights, didn't he? Or was that the second night?
I think he closed both nights, maybe.
No, I think he opened both nights.
Maybe.
I think he played both. Yeah, and then the first night was like, I think you played.
We were, I think the last band on. No, we were the second to last band on the.
No, well, how I arranged the night of the first festival where we put a band. We like everybody thinks like the purpose of having like the little band goes first, the next is the bigger band and it's so for people's fucking egos and shit. We didn't do that.
Yeah.
We put a big band. We put a big band first, and like the band people wanted to see first and last.
Yeah.
Like I think Black Tape played last. I think you played either first or last one night. Love Child played first.
I think we might have played first. I can't remember though.
I think we played first the night I played, and it was supposed to be then me, then Love Lies Crushing. But Love Lies Crushing, he disappeared and we had to change the thing. So Michael Plaster did have to come out and play acoustic right after us, which was horrible for him. But he was great. I thought he played great, but it was just
Sean
like...
And Sean Foley was there too.
That was the second year, I think.
Maybe. I can't remember.
I'd have to go look because that's pathetic. I can't remember. It was like, I remember the first year it was 1996. It was my 30th birthday. Was one of the festivals. The nights was my 30th birthday. But they both went. I mean, I thought both of those were fun. I mean, I don't know that I have it in me to really do that kind of stuff anymore. I mean, I still know how, but promoting an event, I don't know that like, I think there's two things that are required when you're booking and promoting is you have to be really focused and detail oriented. And like, I'm not normally that, but when it comes to promoting something, I am. Like, you don't want me handling the money, but as far as like the organizing of the actual show, I have a pretty good idea how to do that. And, but you also have to be like a dick sometimes. Like, you really have to be like ready to just tell people to go fuck themselves. And that was the same thing when I used to do the booking for Projekt. I used to call people up and I would be like, I'm going to break your fucking kneecaps with a baseball bat. I remember one time it was Lycia because they were supposed to have food. Like, I had convinced you guys to go on tour. I think you were with them. And Mike had just found out he had diabetes.
Yeah.
And I was like telling him I'm like, this is not picking the green M&Ms out. This is, you have to be there. There has to be food. It's a health matter.
Yeah.
And the guy wasn't there. And I called people and they told me the bar he was at. He was at a different bar getting drunk. And I called up and was like, I told him I was going to fly down there and break his fucking leg if he didn't get his ass over to the fucking thing. And so I'm not that big of a dick anymore. And so maybe I'm not suited to doing that sort of thing anymore. Because you kind of do wind up having to like scream at people.
I think Ridge had to do some of that for us too. Like I feel like I remember them having to threaten people also.
They were good up to a point. They were a good booking agency and good up to a point. I felt like
they were good to us.
They were very good to us. They did a lot. They got us into like they were way better at booking than I was. But toward the end, I remember there was a story that was funny. There was like, we're going to do a 3-date tour. and I forget who all, I don't remember, there's 3 bands, I don't remember who the 3rd band was, but it was Electric Hellfire Club, Thanatos, and somebody else. And we were going to do this 3-day tour. And this was the last time Bay Ridge never would talk to me again, even though it turned out I was right. And what happened was is they had one promoter doing 2 of the shows, and or at least 2. He might have been doing 3, but he was doing a show at the Fantasies, and he was doing a show in Columbus, Ohio, somewhere. I don't remember what the venue was, and obviously Fantasies in Cleveland. And I called the guy up and I talked to him for like 5 fucking minutes, and I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's full of shit. And I called Bay Ridge and told him that, and he fucking went off on me like, bullshit, and fuck you, and I was like, all right, okay. Well, Thomas and whoever else was on that tour went out. When they showed up at the Columbus show, the venue was like, what are you talking about? There's no show tonight. Like, there wasn't even a show. It was never booked.
Oh,
like, they never called the venue. And I don't know what happened in Cleveland, but it might have been the same sort of thing. Like, it was just like the guy was just a fantasist who like bullshitted them, and they never tried to backstop or check where he booked. Like, you always got to call the venue. Like, if you're the band, if you're the booking agent, you don't just trust some other fucktard to do it for you. You have to fucking actually follow up. And, you know, I don't know, maybe they were having a hard time about, you know, something else. Maybe they were working on a big tour with somebody else, and it just wasn't a big deal to them. But that really, I know that fucked Thomas Thorne up pretty bad, because I remember he wound up going back and like working at a porno shop in Wisconsin at the time. But so I mean, I didn't have to go work at a porno shop because I didn't do the shows, and it winds up costing me money, because he was like me. It's like when we went on the tour, I paid the band for the tour. They were paid. It wasn't like Tucker went out on tour with me for free. He got paid, and and same with Eric. Maybe when we did a show here and there, I even just for shows tried to pay people. And so I know Thomas did the same thing, had a hired band. And so you book this band to go out, and then your shows all bail on you. You still have to pay them. Sure, right. So it fucks you up really bad. It's not like, you know, I run into a lot of people, and, you know, we're talking about playing shows and touring, and I'm like, I'm playing in Chicago sometimes. I don't give a shit if I get paid. Because a lot of times I'm just recording the show and I'm doing it for fun or whatever, and I don't care. And sometimes I've done things in other places where I used it as an excuse to go there. Like, I had to go there anyway, so I was like, why not play a show? And so I don't worry about it too much. But when you go out and do shows when you're touring, it's your job. Yeah. You know? And like, there's a lot of musicians who are not like me. They're musicians who have decent jobs. And so they don't care. They'll go out and play for nothing because they have a day job. I don't. Like, I work doing freelance shit, you know, and whatever I can make money at here and there. And but I sure as fuck am not going to go out and play shows and tour and make no money. It's just not going to happen. Right. And also, back in the day, you could eat it on a show here and there because you would sell T-shirts. You would sell. Yeah. And that just doesn't really work anymore, you know. So. Right. Well, and two, like, you know, I feel like now, because we do have jobs, it's like I have to be able to justify taking time off from my job to go do something. Right. I mean, right. I've known musicians who, like, they had real jobs, but they also were like, they were serious musicians, and they would get a band of people that were talented but like them, and like you're describing, there were people who worked doing this, or they had real jobs, responsible jobs. And so if you're going to try to do a tour, it's hard enough. Like it's hard for you to figure out one person or two people how to do it. Right. Now you've got 4 or 5, and they're all different, all with different kinds of jobs. Right. And how the fuck do you coordinate that so everybody can take a week off even? It's impossible. Well, and we have the child also. Right. You know. Right. Yeah. And so, you know, that's why you hire people if you can afford to do. because you pay them, like I'd say a week out for like you obviously pay all the expenses, like you pay for food, you pay for
sure,
all the hotels, gas, all that shit. But you also have to pay them something,
right?
And but that enables you to be able to actually tour. I've always had.
If we do it, it's going to be very simple. It'll be mic and acoustic guitar and two microphones and a bunch of pedals, and then we will bring a sound guy with us. So that will be our hired person. We never had a sound man back in the day. And that was one of Mike's huge reasons why he quit playing shows, because there was no consistency on what you were going to sound like every single.
Our joke was the guy talking to the mic going 1, 2, 1, 2, and then if you got a guy who did 1, 2, 3, you're like, holy shit, he can count to 3, and that was the genius sound man. I remember a show in Pittsburgh. Like, I think the most unprofessional thing a musician can do is talk to the sound people from the stage.
Yeah.
I think you do hand signals, or you tell somebody else to go tell them. I hate when people converse with the sound person. So I never did it. But at this one show, the guy was just fucking randomly fiddling with stuff. And so in the middle of the song, I thought, what the fuck are you doing? Like, he's taking the monitors out and stuff. Like he was just like didn't have it. Like, what does this do? Just leave it all alone.
Keep your hands off of the knobs.
Yeah, fucking keep your hands up and leave it be. And so yeah, I mean, I understand that pain, especially if it's like we were more straightforward by the end. The bigger tour we did at the end of the touring Thanatos, and then anytime we did short tours after that, or short, like 2-3 day things, it was pretty much a straight up rock band. Bass player, guitar player, drummer. Not too hard to deal with. They're used to that. But you get somebody who has a line out that's a foot pedal, 2 vocal mics. I'm like, for some reason that should be simpler, but no.
Well, Mike always had the problem getting feedback on his vocals. So, I mean, it was a nightmare. Nobody could ever get it right. Sam actually did a really good job doing sound.
He's good. Yeah, he's good at it.
Yeah, but I mean, who was that one guy? There was the guy from Stromkern, I think, did sound for us a couple times.
This guy, oh man, how is his name eluding me? I can see his face.
I know.
Oh my God.
He was good.
He was friends with the drummer from Thanatos. One of the many hundred drummers that were in Thanatos, like about.
So when we had Sam, it was fine, and like when we lucked out and had a guy like that, we were fine. But like generally speaking, nobody knew at that point. Nobody knew what the hell to do with all that affected guitars and whatever.
Well, I also felt like when I was coming to town, if it was like a music venue, they weren't bringing their A person in for that night, because they were going for the $50 guy, not the $200 guy when I was playing there. And so I always felt that was part of the problem. And I was never one to do a big sound check. I always was like, your sound check should take like fucking 5 minutes. Like, if you can't do your sound check in like 15 minutes, you should go do another job. And unless there's an absolute, some kind of problem with something. And then in that case,
go ahead.
I remember, like, there's all kinds of horror stories, like place in Orlando where I'm like, there were no monitors.
Yeah.
And the booking guy was like, well, you didn't ask for monitors. I'm like, go get the contract. He got it. On the back was a map, what we needed on the stage, and there were little blocks that said monitor on them. It's like, see?
Well, and isn't that kind of a common thing that people need?
Yeah. Well, you can't, I'm trying to explain. I was going, you can't hear on the stage. And so they had no monitors. And I told them, I'm like, this is the point at which most bands will leave. and you're fucked if you're not going to play. But I'm going to play. And it was just, we couldn't hear a fucking thing the whole night. It was miserable. I could hear Tucker's guitar. I could hear his Marshall guitar amp blaring in my head. And that was pretty much it. All I could hear. I couldn't hear myself, couldn't hear my guitar. Anything. What were you were about to tell a horror story?
Oh, yeah. We played Richmond one time, and the guy that showed up to do sound was completely high, like on heroin. And so he was just not there, right? And so Mike finally said, stop touching things and just go ahead and leave. And he asked the DJ, he goes, do you know how to turn the volume up and down? And the guy goes, yeah. And he's like, then don't let him touch the board, and you stand there and just turn the volume up and down. But yeah, just stupid shit like that, you know? So that's why if we play another show, we will bring a sound man with us.
Well, I mean, I can't, and like I was talking about doing shows, but I was really more talking about just doing acoustic stuff with me. And I'm leery of that because I can be really terrible acoustic. If I get this, what?
That's the risk. There's nothing to hide behind.
Yeah, you're naked. It's like being up there naked, man. You're like there's nobody, like you fuck up. Like I get flustered. Like if things start going wrong, then it snowballs and it's a nightmare. Because I've done some nightmare shows. And I also, I need a sound check. Because the couple times where I walked in and just started playing, and those have been bad shows too, because I'm not practicing in that environment. I'm not practicing with that mic. I'm not practicing. And so what I'm hearing, and I'll have trouble getting in key with vocals. I'll have, I can't hit the guitar. It doesn't sound like I want it to. And so it's something that just running through a couple of things would help. And a few times, the times I've done that have been pretty disastrous. I felt. But the idea of getting a band and doing like multiple shows is just not something I think is in the cards.
We just wouldn't be, because we always daydream like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to put a full band, have Dave and to have Mike and John, and to be able to put the full band together and go out and perform like the way it sounds on the record and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, okay, realistically, we all live all over the country. We all have jobs. We all have health issues. We have a child. And so it's like, we just, Mike started playing the acoustic around the house. Like, God, it's been a couple years now. And so we always just kind of sing along and play in the house. We're like, well, this is what we're doing. This is the way to do it.
In a few years, you can be like Patti Smith and you can have Dirk play with you.
Yeah, for sure.
What I felt like, I've always been a little like, I know it doesn't work this way. People don't ask you to do this, but it's like, I think playing festivals would be cool. But, like there's no appropriate festival for somebody like me to play at, and then nobody's going to really, they're not looking for somebody who's this offbeat weirdo that has a tiny following, But I think that kind of thing would be like, anywhere I go that's a big city, I mean, you're going to get like 3 people coming, But if you do one show someplace where people are going to come, you might get more. And I don't think people, like, if I were going to do so, I would really, I think Chicago's a good place to do stuff like that. I would love to just do like, I mean, even just a one-night show here in Chicago with that whole, like, not do a Projekt festival, but just do something with a bunch of those bands. And, I'm lucky because a lot of times the people I would work with, like I did a 20th anniversary show with a band here in Chicago, and I did an acoustic thing in New York, both which were very fun. But like for the Thanatos, I think it was 20th or 25th anniversary of the first record. And it was me, Tim Larson, playing keyboards, and he doesn't usually play keyboards, William playing guitar, and Eric playing bass as usual. And we practiced like twice. We ran through the songs like twice. And I already know them because I fucking wrote them. and I practice them. I know how to play them, and my music is not super complicated. William can hear anything I fucking make up and play it like off the top of his fucking head, and so it was pretty simple. I keep kicking the stand. It was pretty simple for them. So it's like I think one of the practices somebody didn't show up. Like it was like we really practiced like all together like once, and then we went out and played, and it came out well. That is actually up at Bandcamp. That show is up at Bandcamp. So if you don't believe me that it's good, you can go listen to it. It's at door number 3. It's the live thing, and so I'm lucky with that. Like if I were to get people to do it, it would be people like that. I find the notion of you're going to sit like all these people I know that had bands and they practiced like fucking 3 times a week for like 4 months. I'm like, don't you fuckers know how to play? I mean, why do you need to practice for 3 months? I mean, I don't understand that. I'm not even that great of a musician, and I don't need to practice. I mean, to me, that just makes it boring. I'll be up there. I would be up there on stage playing like, thinking about my laundry list because I'd be so sick of the song.
See, for me, and I think Mike is the same way, we want to remove all nervousness from it. So if I'm thinking about the lyrics, then I'm going to get so distracted by what's the next lyric that I'm not going to be into the performance as much. So that's why we practice a lot, because it's like, I want it to be so hammered into my head that it's muscle memory, and I don't have to think about that, so that I'm not distracted by being nervous for that reason.
Well, it sounds like I'm contradicting myself when I say this, because what I was saying was like, when I'm playing acoustic, I can get flustered and blah, blah, blah. But that is because of outside things. It's not because of I'm worried about. It's like if there's a technical problem or there's things like that, that sends me on a spiral. And it's not like I'm never nervous. I've never been nervous in my life playing a show.
Man.
Never.
I am. See, again, like if I know my lyrics backwards and forwards and everything, and I don't have to think about that, then if some jackass is distracting me in the crowd, it's not going to throw me off. But if I'm like fumbling for lyrics and then there's some jackass, you know what I mean? Then it becomes this like whatever thing, distraction that people are paying you to perform. I want to perform. I don't want to like give them what they paid for.
I feel like too much practice actually makes me worse, in the sense that with a band. Now, I do need to practice. Like, I was talking to William Faith about this, how like we don't pick up a guitar sometimes for like 4 months. But then we're going to do so. You're going to record, or like I was going in to record with him at his studio, and I'm like, I need to know these goddamn songs, because I don't want to be in there like spending time and effort and money and everything recording this shit. And fucking around. And so I practiced those a lot, and I was always playing just to keep my hands working. And so that's true. I do need to do that. But with a band, I just feel like for me, and it's weird because I have people always think it's weird because I have bad social anxiety, and everybody always thinks that's weird because I like, this seems so gregarious, and so I'm going into act. It's how I feel like I have to be entertaining. You bring me into a room full of people, like I feel like throwing up. It's more before I get there, I feel worse about it. But
that's
it's like,
me too.
Yeah, once I get there, I'm usually fine. But at the same time, I'm kind of almost like performing in that instance in some way too. I feel like I have to be entertaining and engaging to everybody, and that makes me a nervous wreck.
Yeah.
And but performing is different because I feel like I'm separated. Like I'm not with them. That is true. Over there, and it doesn't have any impact on me. I don't worry about it. It's like, and
for me, it's definitely the buildup of thinking, okay, I've got a show Friday. Monday, I start feeling sick about it. Yeah. And until I'm all the way there, like if I could just cut from on April 1st, we set a show on April 30th. If I could just cut from April 1st to actually walking on the stage April 30th and not have that in between part, I would be fine. It's that anticipational nervousness and anxiety that gets worse and worse and worse and worse.
Well, I worry about like I'm not worried. I get worried about promotion and stuff like that because it's like, well, you never really know how many people are going to show up when I play. You know, it's like I've done shows and I've been like, wow, there's a lot of people here, and then I've done shows where it's like, you know, not a lot of people show up, and I found that like I'm not a local band guy. I'm not like the local bands, you know, these guys who go out and play on the weekends.
Right.
It's just never been me. I've never wanted to do that. And I find that it like, if I played in the same city over and over again, it would be diminishing returns, and I'd wind up with 3 people there.
Yeah.
You know, eventually, if that, be empty. Because it's not, again, it's the kind of music. I think it's not like, I mean, I don't want to hear me play every fucking week because it's a little bit, it can be kind of dreary. But I worry more about the way, like figuring out how to get people to the show.
Yeah.
And how I solve that problem is I basically, I go into work mode. I'm like, okay, so how do I promote this? Who do I try to get to? Do I send out emails? Do I contact all the various calendar sections in the city? Do I do? And so that's how I work that out by working. And it alleviates, even if it winds up doing nothing, it alleviates the kind of anxiety, and that is like the same sort of feeling as that, like, you know, like the thing I dread more than anything is weddings. Like I dread weddings. They're like that's a social event that is like, it's just they're not. That is like the all balled into one thing, like what I hate.
Yeah.
And so I'm old now, so like you don't get invited to, like when you're in your like mid to late 20s, you get invited to fucking a wedding every week. And I successfully avoided most of them.
Yeah, I don't. Mike and I both. I mean, I'm weird because I'm like an extroverted introvert, but more introverted, I guess. And I think I'm a lot like you in that people are surprised that we probably are as anxious about shit as we are. Because I think we both kind of come across as like sort of bombastic in a lot of ways. You know what I mean?
But at the same time, yeah, I could also be like very like loud and aggressive and but it was also, when I was younger, I was also drunk a lot. So
yeah,
and that was the reason for it. Like I was talking about people having drinking and problems and all that. I always say you can have a drinking problem and not be an addictive personality. It can be you trying to like cover up anxiety. Like you want to go out for the night when you're 20, but it makes you nervous because you're going out to all these people. And it's also why you go to the same place, because you're so used to that place.
Right.
But you can also develop the habit of, before I go out, I drink a fucking quart of Jack Daniels, you know, and and that can be, even if you're not an addictive personality, that's unhealthy. And it's much better to just deal with it in other ways.
Right. Yeah, I never was anxious like that when I was younger. Like I didn't have social anxiety that I remember. But like the older I get and stuff, and like I've worked out of my house for 11 years now, so I don't even have to go into an office even before this pandemic. So I'm just very used to being at home and like in my controlled environment. So anything that's out of my routine, I start getting days leading up to it, like the building it up in my mind. Okay, next Tuesday I have to go for this doctor's appointment and all the stuff that goes along with you know what I mean? So I'm like, on the one hand, I really want to play shows again, but on the other hand, I'm like, but what if?
Yeah, you're creating problems for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm just weird. I don't like everything I say. Like there's like I'm one thing, and then I'm also the opposite thing. And so it's like I don't like having a routine. I don't like being trapped inside. I don't like, even when I'm like I work a lot. Like I've had jobs in the past where I worked part-time working at a wine shop or doing something like that, but it's a part-time job. And what I mostly do is work doing freelance writing and freelance consulting about different things. And so I'm at home 90% of the time for that. But even when I do that, I have to get up and go out. Like I go out and, you know, I will ride my bike. I'll make an excuse to go do something.
Yeah.
And I have to be out and doing stuff. And I find that if I'm doing anything creative, it's stifling to be trapped inside. I like to take a trip and go somewhere. Like I like to go, you know, even when I go down to visit Florida, it's you know, my family still lives there, and I go down there, it's like something that works. And you know, I make an excuse, like I covered an art fair that was going on in Philadelphia. That was my excuse to go to Philadelphia. And while I'm there, I'm doing creative stuff in my head at the very least.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me. Like I don't like a routine, but I still broadly have these things that are routines that I don't like to have broken. So it's kind of a combination of the two things. I'm working really hard on doing a lot of music. And for me, I mean, I released the album in 2020. I released the album in 2021. And this year, I mean, another thing about streaming is I think that it behooves you to release a lot of music. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at your numbers on the streaming services, which is a lot what I've been doing a lot lately, you find that you put out a record and you see the streams and how it goes up, your overall streams, you promote it a little bit, let people know about it. And maybe it's just Christmas time ending, but it's about a month or so out, and it's only the first record I've done where I've really paid attention to the streaming. It just falls off.
Yeah.
And so I think every 3 or 4 months releasing something is probably ideal.
Yeah.
And this is different from how it used to be. And so part of that is the cover record. I have another cover record, I'm doing 70 covers. And everybody has a different idea of what that means. I mean it in the broadest sense. It was recorded in the fucking 70s. It came out in the 70s. Doesn't have to be any particular genre. And so I'm working on that. And then I'm doing a record of new material that's going to be all not covers. And I really want to do a Christmas record. I want to do 3 my ambition is to do 3 records this year.
That's a lot.
So we'll see. I have a lot of ambitions that don't actually happen too. So.
Yeah, it's funny. The company I work for requires us to take classes, so many hours of classes. And I took a class today, and the topic was, are you one of those people, a creative person that has too many projects going on? And how do you focus on like you have so much stuff that you want to do that you're just kind of stuck? Because which one do you do? And anyways, it was this whole thing about how to break it down and figure out how to prioritize and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'll never do any of this, but this is good information.
Well, I work much better when I have 10 things to do. Like if I have one thing to do, I'll never get it done. But if you give me 10 things to do, I'll get all of them done. And I think that's probably an attention deficit disorder thing, because I can only pay attention to one thing for so long. I'm hopping around like a monkey in a tree. And so I always tell people, like, my theory, and it's not really my theory, I read this many years ago, that, you know, attention deficit disorder is an evolutionary thing. And that is because if you were a Australopithecine out on the African plain, and you could really focus on what's in front of you, you got eaten by a leopard, right? If you were an Australopithecine who could pay attention to 10 things at once, you would see the leopard coming and you'd haul ass. And so I think that it's a not always a negative thing. And I mean, a friend of mine who told me this, it's like that behaviors like that are not a problem unless they're a problem.
Right.
You know, like if you're like that and you make it work, more power to you. But if you're like that and it disrupts your life,
right,
story.
Right.
And so I'm good at doing a bunch of different things, but usually they're different things, not like 3 different music projects.
Yeah.
And so this will be interesting to see. And I'm not doing them all at the same time, but I'm trying to get through doing them as fast as I can.
Yeah. Cool.
And I love Christmas music.
I love Christmas too, and I love Christmas music.
Well, the problem is now I have to. I have to record Christmas music when it's not Christmas, so you're kind of not in the Christmas spirit, you know? So you don't think
Yeah.
Christmas is over, but you can't, if you record it in November, then you're never going to get it out in time.
Yeah.
And so I have to I'll be recording fucking Christmas record in like June. You know?
Daydream about it being cold out, I guess. I don't know.
I hate summertime because where I live in a basement apartment, and it's like the windows are not set up so you can put an air conditioning unit, and it doesn't have central air. So it's like a fucking oven in that place. So I dread the summertime in Chicago, and I don't like hot weather in general, even though I'm from Florida. I don't like hot weather. But so it's like it'll be just totally not conducive to recording Christmas songs like "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." You're sweating.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like brutal. I hate being hot. Every day, like, I mean, it's not so bad now because it's not hot, but as soon as it starts getting warm, I'm like, why the fuck are we here? Like, it's nonstop sun. And I know that, you know, coming from the Midwest, I have a lot of family back there that are like, oh, I love the sun. I love the sun. It's like, yeah, but it's like there's never any clouds in the sky, and it's like glaring sun. There's like no escaping it. Not the same thing. Not the same.
Yeah.
Like, having sun here isn't the same as having a nice sunny day in Chicago or Cleveland. You know what I mean?
Well, you also have like down there, you have like the dry heat. It's 105 degrees, and it's pretty miserable. But like South Florida, it's like fucking 95 degrees every day. When I grew up there, it actually has gotten worse. It's a lot hotter. I saw the statistic that was that from 2 years ago in 1970, there are something like 3 solid months more, like 90 days a year more of temperatures in the 90-degree range in South Florida than there were in 1970.
Yeah.
And so, and it's like I grew up there, and back in those days, it wasn't hot all the time. And now it's that you have a lot more really hot days, and then you have the muggy, miserableness. And I dislike that more than the dry. I mean, I remember being in Arizona, 110 degrees and going golfing. I was working for a band, and I went golfing.
So once the monsoon kicks in, the humidity level does go up. So it'll be 110 degrees, and the humidity level is elevated enough to where it's fucking miserable. And also, so a couple, like, what was it? Not this past summer, but the summer before, we actually didn't get a monsoon at all. So there was literally no relief from it, because at least when the monsoon starts, the humidity level goes up and it's really hot. But every day you have this like cloud buildup and like the potential for a rain. And when there was no monsoon, so it was just like glaring sun and 110 degrees for like 6 months. Oh my God. Not fun.
Well, it's funny. In a couple of days, probably Monday, all my friends in Florida are going to be sending me these pictures of them by the pool and stuff, because it's going to be like 4 degrees below zero here. And but I'm like, no, I just don't go outside when it's that cold. That's what you do. You stay, because it's fucking miserable to go out. It's not like you're going out for a walk when it's that. And it's like, I would rather have that than be like in December and it's 90. You know,
I agree. I completely agree. Yeah. I mean, like, this is the only good time of the year here. Like, from about the end of October until the beginning of April. And even that can be iffy sometimes, because the past, like, I think I've turned the air conditioner on in February the last 2 years.
We're talking about weather now. That's amazing.
I know we've
devolved. Old people. We're like old people talking about weather. Next, we're going to be talking about our fucking hemorrhoids or something.
I know. How's your arthritis hanging in there? You know, whatever. Mike had torn rotator cuffs. How about you?
Yeah. Well, that's what we should have. We should try to have some projects. We should try to make another festival happen. You could live your band dream, and we could do it here in Chicago. And we'd have to pick the band. So who would it be?
Well, I mean, I definitely think obviously the two of us, and then attrition would be good.
I don't know if Martin wants to come to the United States these days. I don't know how he feels about that.
We could convince him.
Yeah.
You know, he does all
What?
He does all of our mastering now.
Yeah, he mastered the last 2 Thanatos records.
Yeah.
So yeah, Martin would be good. I always like seeing him. It's nice to have him. It'd be nice to have him over here. Who else? There has to be a 4th band. I mean, Sam. It's always hard to get him to get together and do a band because it's like it costs him so much to get everything together and do it. And I don't get the vibe that Sam really enjoys playing live all that much.
Yeah. I mean, I would love Spirals Downwards, but they're Love Spirals now, and I don't know. But I think how funny that would be the original.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how Ryan feels about playing live. You'd have to ask him. But then you could also do like, does it have to be all the band? Oh, Michael Plaster, would he be into it? I don't know. I haven't talked to him for years.
Yeah.
So Scott Cortez lives here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Or at least he did last time I knew anything. Maybe Scott was, and he plays here with a certain amount of frequency. I saw him play I'm saying it's not that long ago. It's probably 5 fucking years ago. And he had this weird instrument he was using. He was really good. I always really liked his music.
Yeah, I think he still plays shows because he's on my friend list, and I think he still plays shows.
He's not real responsive. I used to run into him on the bus and stuff every once in a while. I don't know. He's not always the easiest person to get hold of and maintain communication with. He's like got his own kind of vibe. But I'm trying to think who else was on Projekt back then. I mean, there's some of the bands that are newer, like, and I'm saying newer, they were on Projekt like 20 years ago, like Audra.
Right. Oh, yeah, Audra.
Yeah, but it's like Audra wasn't on the label until after I left, I'm pretty sure, because I don't remember working one of their records or anything. But I like them. They're kind of near here.
Friends.
Are they near here? Do they live in like Minnesota or something? I don't know. Where do they
No,
live?
they live here. He lives a few miles up. Yeah.
Who am I thinking of? There's another band I was thinking of, but I'm confusing them with. I know Audra's music. I have their records. So.
Yeah.
What the fuck was that? But
was Faith and Disease on Projekt?
No, they were Test, and I think that is not going to work because I think that is all dispersed in the wind. I don't know. Hey, maybe Trance to the Sun, maybe, or Moon. I guess they've moved their celestial body from the sun to the moon. But I mean, the problem is that people getting here.
Maybe
it's like,
instead of calling it a Projekt festival, it's like the '90s American goth darkwave festival.
How many of those bands? Like, there's a lot of bands that I'm not going to rag on people. I'm not going to say their names.
Something just happened. I'm not sure what happened. I'm going to wait and see if he pops back on, and then if not, I'll end it here. Just before we were getting ready to talk crap about people. Not really. There's nobody to talk crap about. I think his battery actually might have died. That's what it's looking like on my screen. Yep. All right, my friends. I'm going to end it here. It was nice hanging out again. It's been a while. And I will talk to you again soon. Bye.